This is a Maamer from the Rebbe. Hadeshem li Biozroi, v'ani ere b'soina yud beis Tammuz tovshin yud zayin, from 60 years ago. This winter, we learned two very difficult Hamsheichim. The first was the Tishrei Hemshech Tavshin Chav Gimel, which I believe was 3 Maimarim. And then, of course, the Hemshech from Tavshin Tezvav, which I believe was 5 Maimarim of the Rebbe, of which 2 were edited and 3 were unedited. And it was quite a struggle. And whenever you learn a series, a Hemshech, there's an upside and a downside. Of course, the upside is you get to delve into something in a very complete way. The downside is you have to keep track of it, and if you lose track, it becomes overwhelming. This is not a Hemshech, it's a standalone Maamer that we will learn in 3 classes according to the plan that I have prepared. Today we're going to learn the Maamer itself, meaning to say the pasuk with which this Maamer begins, the explanation of this pasuk, the questions as well as the answers, and the relationship between this pasuk and Yud Beis Tammuz. The second class and the third class are going to explore the biur of this Maamer, which is very deep. It's very, very deep. The second class will be on Eidos Chukim and Mishpatim, and the third class is going to be on, if I have, for lack of words, 2 ideas in Atzmos. The concept of Atzmos or Achtos, which is removed from the world, and then a higher level, the concept of Atzmos or Achtos, which is with the world itself. And that's basically what's going to happen. So I'm going to start now with the introduction to this Maamer and to this first class. It's after Yud Beis Tammuz, and I'm nevertheless choosing to do a Yud Beis Tammuz Maamer because we're close enough to Yud Beis Tammuz. It's within days of Yud Beis Tammuz, and I wanted to do something b'kesher with Yud Beis Tammuz, particularly this Maamer. This Maamer Havaya li Biozroi, v'ani ere b'soina. Of course, the Rebbe has a number of versions of it, and the message of the Maamer is incredibly powerful. So let's first begin with an introduction. During the week that the previous Rebbe was liberated, which begins the Shabbos before, which is Pashas Balak, and ends the Shabbos after, which is Shabbos Pashas Pinchas, that's 8 days, the Frierdiker Rebbe said and wrote 5 Maimarim. 5 Maimarim in a week. That's an awful lot of Chassidus. That's an incredible volume of Chassidus. If a Rebbe wrote 4 Maimarim a week or 5 Maimarim a week on a regular basis, you're talking about, 200 Maimarim a year. It's extraordinary. But during the week and the days leading up to his liberation, and then the days of his liberation, and the days after his liberation, and when he came home, and so on, the previous Rebbe said and wrote 5 Maimarim. And when you examine these Maimarim, you see that it wasn't only that the Rebbe was giving a lot of Chassidus, but that the Chassidus that he was giving was very, very much in concert with what was going on. The Maimarim are incredibly connected. In other words, Maimarim very obviously, very plainly reveal the inyan of the Ma'aser and the Geulah, the arrest and the liberation of the previous Rebbe. The first Maamer, which was Shabbos Pashas Balak, which was, I guess, Tes Tammuz. Yud Beis Tammuz was Tuesday that year, so Shabbos before was Tes Tammuz. He said a Maamer, Gefen mi Mitzrayim Tasiya. And the essence of the Maamer is the Medrash that says that Yisrael are compared to a Gefen, the Jewish people are compared to a vine, that when you plant grapes, and then after they grow, you cut them and plant them someplace else, you get sweeter grapes. And if you cut them and plant them in a third place, you get grapes which are sweeter still, and so on. And of course, the nimshal is that the Jewish people that are compared to a gefen, by moving them from place to place, tasiya, the fruit that they produce and the wine that they ultimately give out is even better and sweeter and richer and happier than it was before. Now, when you learn the Maamer, it's so obvious how this is connected to the inyan of Yud Beis Tammuz, because the story of Yud Beis Tammuz, and this, remember, this is 3 days before he was freed, and he was meant to spend 3 years in exile. So 3 days before he was told that he's free, and 4 days before he was liberated, he said a Maamer describing the phenomenon of Jewish people moving from place to place, that in hindsight, of course, is a reflection of the fact that as a result of Yud Beis Tammuz, he actually left Russia and moved to a different country, and then eventually came to the United States. And of course, when you move from place to place, the wine, the grapes that you produce are sweeter, and so on. That's the first Maamer. Shabbos, Pashas Balak. The second Maamer was Yud Beis Tammuz, which was a Tuesday. And as you know the story, the Russians, the communists, Stalin, Yimach Shmei, wanted to give people a day off, a day of rest, but he couldn't do it on Shabbos because that would allow the Jewish people to celebrate Shabbos, and that would be terrible, as far as he's concerned. He couldn't do it on Sunday because then Lahavdil, the Eastern Christians, would be able to celebrate their day of rest. So he made it on Tuesday. And as a result of this, when the cable arrived from Moscow, when the telegram arrived from Moscow, and the previous Rebbe was free to go, the office was closed. The Frierdiker Rebbe was walking in the street. He met somebody who worked in those offices, and he was told that a cable arrived that he's free, and that the following day, Wednesday, Yud Gimel Tammuz, which in Russia at that time was the equivalent of Monday in America, was the beginning of the work week. So the previous Rebbe was meant to report every Wednesday. That's the way it was when you were in an exile, when you were sent to a certain city, so you were free to roam the parameters of the city, you just couldn't leave. And every week you reported in the beginning of the week, and the beginning of the week then was Wednesday. So on that Wednesday, when the previous Rebbe reported to the offices who were overseeing his exile, they told him officially that he's free to go, and he left. I believe he left Thursday, and I suspect he left after Kiryas HaTorah on Thursday. He arrived home on Friday, which would be Tezvov Tammuz. And then Shabbos, there was a Sudas Haidah, there was a celebration, which was done really quietly by the Rebbe's own behest. The Rebbe Chaya Mushka, who was then single, was the one who had gone along with the previous Rebbe into his exile, and she was the one who called the house with a very quick message, and the message was, Mir kumen heim of Shabbos, beli pirsum, we're coming home for Shabbos, and don't tell people. So that it was a very quiet celebration of Sudas Haidah that Shabbos. So on Tuesday, when he was told unofficially that he's free, he wrote and he said, or at least he said, the Maamer Hashem li Biozroi v'niyeh b'Sinai, which is the source of the Maamer we have here. It's curious because who could the Rebbe have talked to in Kostroma on that Tuesday? There were exactly two Chassidim with him. There was a Michal Dvorkin, there was a Chaim Altois, and there was of course the Rebbe Chaya Mushka. But aside from that, there was nobody else there. That was the second Maamer. Wednesday, Yud Gimel Tammuz, when he's told officially that he was free, he said a Maamer, a relatively short Maamer, Baruch HaGemel L'Chayavim Teved Shem Nolani Tev, thanking the Eibishter who redeemed him. And the content of this Maamer, Baruch HaGemel, what makes it unusual, is that the Rebbe explains that whenever a person goes through a hardship and he comes out successfully, he has to thank Hashem. But there are certain challenges that a person goes through where he doesn't only thank Hashem for the challenge that he went through directly, but he thanks Hashem for the challenges that led to the challenge that he just went through. In other words, the spiritual source of the physical challenge, namely Yeridas HaNeshama Lamata, the Neshama descent into this world. In other words, sometimes you thank Hashem for what he did for you, and sometimes when Hashem makes a nest for you, you thank Hashem for the spiritual source and cause that led to the challenge from which he saved you. And that's the difference between Sha'asali Nes and Hagemel L'Chayavim Teved Shem Nolani Tev. So on Wednesday he said and wrote a short Maamer Baruch HaGemel. Shabbos there were two Maamorim. The first was a repeat, but a much more elaborate. It's not the same Maamer. It's a much more elaborate version of the same Baruch HaGemel. And there was a second Maamer, S'u Yedechem Kedesh Uvarach Vos Hashem, which also talks about the idea of bringing bracha down into the world, into the Gashmi Yizdika world. So in 1 week, the previous Rebbe said 5 Maamorim, and as I mentioned, when you look at those Maamorim, you see how overtly they're connected to the events that were happening, the Meiser and Geula of the previous Rebbe. This is the second of those 5, Hashem li Biozroi. Now, of course, the Rebbe over the years, Fabrengt every year Yud Beis Tammuz, and in the later year, the Rebbe had a custom to make 3 Fabrengen on Yud Beis Tammuz. And he would very frequently say Maamorim that were based on these 5, Gefer Mitzrayim Tasiya, Hashem li Biozroi, Baruch HaGemel, and S'u Yedechem Kedesh. And they made a book out of all the Maamorim of the Rebbe that are based on the Maamorim the previous Rebbe said by the Rebbe's Chasana. You could make a book out of all Maimorim that the previous Rebbe wrote and said in conjunction with his Meiser Geula. Just tangentially, incidentally, besides for these 5 Maimorim, the following year, Peiches, which when they were the first Yom Tov, the first celebration at Beis Tammuz, the Rebbe said a Maamer Hashem sheyesh v'eiskim b'teira. This also was a Maamer which the Rebbe frequently reviewed. And of course there are others. There's many others. Remember, there's Nesat Alerech and this is a long conversation. But that initial year, Pei Zayin, there were 5 Maimorim. This is the second of those 5, and I don't know how many Maimorim of the Rebbe Havaya Liba Ej. I would guess half a dozen. Certainly 3 or 4, maybe as many as 5 or 6, where the Rebbe would say a Maimer, and of course on the surface he was reviewing the Maimer of the previous Rebbe, but the Rebbe never reviews a Maimer, he always says a Maimer, so there's always something more, something deeper, something very original about the way the Rebbe studies the Maimer of the previous Rebbe. This Maimer is very deep, it really is. It's a very deep analysis of the Maimer of the previous Rebbe, which begins with this pasuk Havaya Li Biozroi. We tonight are not going into the depth. The depth we'll leave Mitzvah Hashem for the second and the third class. Tonight we're going to learn the Maamer proper. But in learning the Maamer proper, you see how the Maamer is connected to the events that were happening at the time. And moreover, you see how whatever looks, whatever responds, whatever reacts, whatever addresses the challenges that he faces, and perhaps also the people who are providing him with those challenges, and you come away with an impression that's overwhelming. Talking about the idea of Mishalem Teva Tachas Roa, to pay for an evil with a good, I think this Maamer Ad Hashem Libe Ezroi V'Aniyere B'Seinoi makes this point incredibly profoundly, very powerfully. So let me first tell you a Maisele, a story, which is printed in a little booklet called Eires Ba'afela, which is notes and stories written down by the Chassid Remeir Aftzon Olav Shalom, who was a yeshiva bacher in 1927, Tafresh Pei Zayin, and he wrote down several things that he remembered were happening that summer. What happened was the previous Rebbe was arrested, and they wanted to take his life. And huge hashgacha pratis, incredible miracles, just arranged that the opportunity should pass. The window that the Russians and the Soviets had to do this ended. The Rebbe was still alive, and it became impossible. So they wanted to have him do 10 years of slave labor, and then also was overturned. It became 3 years of exile. And instead of 3 years of exile, he had 9 days of exile, a week and 2 days, and then he was let go. The Rebbe came home, and it was an incredible victory for the previous Rebbe, for Yiddishkeit. But it became apparent quite quickly that he wasn't really free. In other words, he was not in jail, he was a free person, but the Soviets were determined to stop what he was doing. And one of the ways of explaining the events of that time was that they basically made him the only free man in Russia, and everybody else was a prisoner. If you came next to the Frierdiker Rebbe, you got arrested. So the previous Rebbe was free, but he couldn't talk to anybody. And of course, he was the center of all the activities of spreading Yiddishkeit and Chinuch and Tashbad in Russia at that time. If he could not interact with his followers, because they would be punished for simply meeting him, he became almost an obstacle. And that's one of the explanations for why the Rebbe understood that he must leave Russia, because as much as he'd been the center of the effort until that point, he recognized that he was now an obstacle to the continuing of that effort, and it needed to become decentralized and function more like individual cells, where one group doesn't know about another, and so on. There were other explanations for why the Rebbe left Russia, but this is a simple one. He realized this almost immediately. So after he came home and he spent Shabbos, a short time later, not much later, he left his home in Leningrad and moved to the private residence of a Jew living in a suburb of Moscow called Malachavka, and gave strict instructions no one was to come to see him. No one was to come to see him. And he spent that summer in meditation, in thought. He was contemplating what he should do, whether he should leave Russia, whether he should stay and fight, how he should proceed. And later on that summer, he made a trip to his father's tzin in Rostov on the anniversary of the Yartzeit of the establishment of Yeshivas Temchet Tmimim in Tafresh Nun Zayin. That was Tafresh Pei Zayin, 30 years on. Yud Gimel Elul, and he came out and he said that Tatat Negeb Rishus Haraisa, my father permitted me to leave, and he went back home to Leningrad, Petersburg, and he spent a month at home, and he opened up all the doors and allowed all the Chassidim to come, and the Soviets looked away. They really did. And for that period of time, that Tishrei, that Simchas Torah, thousands of Chassidim would spend time with the Rebbe. For many people, it would be the last time they would ever see the Rebbe, and for many, it would be the only time they would see the Rebbe, because they knew there wouldn't be another opportunity like this. And then, of course, the day after Simchas Torah, the Rebbe left Russia. So during that summer, when the Rebbe was to a very great extent in isolation, there were 5 people, Asher Nikvu B'Shem, who he identified by name, who were allowed to see him, allowed to come to speak to him. One of them was the Chassid and the Mashpia, who would later become the personal secretary of the previous Rebbe. His name was Reb Chatzah Fagin, Reb Chatzah. He was at that time not the Rebbe's secretary. He was the Menal Peil of the Yeshiva's Temchet Tmimim. He was head of the yeshiva. And he came to see the previous Rebbe in Moscow. And he came back to the Bachrim, to his Talmidim, wherever the yeshiva was at that time, and repeated a number of things that happened in the conversations they had with the Rebbe during that visit. One of them was that the previous Rebbe, in talking about his arrest, said to Reb Chatzah, that when the Mezritcher Maggid was alive and was the Rebbe, the Nasi Biozroi, there was a gezeira against the Mezritcher Maggid, and he was supposed to go to jail just like the Alter Rebbe would later go to jail. And the Mezritcher Hanepoler found out about this. In other words, he knew the spiritual events and what was going to transpire physically as a result of the spiritual events Lamaila. And Abzusha Hanepoler said, Rebbeinu Shalom Zusha Vilnisht. Master of the world, Zusha doesn't want. So it didn't happen. So when the previous Rebbe tells this to Reb Chatzah says to the previous Rebbe, Zol, the Rebbe Zogen as a Vilnisht. So the Rebbe has the same right to say he doesn't want. And the Rebbe didn't respond. He didn't react to that. And of course, there's a lot of different ways of interpreting it. That's the fact. But then there was a discussion about the Efsektia. Part of the tragedy, or much of the tragedy, or most of the tragedy, of what happened in the Soviet Union with Russian Jews, which is millions of Jews, that in a matter of a generation or two, millions of Jews, that in a matter of a generation or two became atheists, lost everything. Before the revolution, 80 or 90% of the Jews in Russia were frum. By the 1930s, 80-90% of the Yidden in Russia were totally, they went to Shul to say Kaddish for their deceased parents. That was it. So it was an unbelievably great tragedy that happened extraordinarily quickly. And of course, the tragedy of this, or part of the tragedy of it, that it was orchestrated by Jews. Lenin and Stalin, Yamach Shmam v'Zichram, and all of their cohorts were socialists, they were Marxists, they were communists, and they believed that religion was the opium of the masses, it was holding people back, it was the reason for class separation and class envy, and they destroyed religion based on the fact that they believed, of course, that it wasn't true, and that religion was used to control people. And they wanted to liberate the masses, and of course they controlled them in an entirely different way, and in a way that was no less cruel than the czars controlled their citizens using the church. But this was how the politik played itself out, that the Soviet system, the communist system, was very anti-religion, and of course they, al Hashem v'al Mashiach, they destroyed God, they destroyed houses of worship, they destroyed anybody who tried to be religious, and certainly above all else, anybody tried to raise Yiddish kinderlach, from children. And in the case of the Jewish people, this effort to destroy religion was led by Jews. And it was called the Efsekim, the Efsektia. The Sektia means like a sect in English. Efsektia means the Yivrei Sektia, the Jewish group of communists. And in other words, it was bad enough that so much was done to destroy Yiddishkeit. What made it so sad was that it was Jews who were trying to destroy Yiddishkeit. And many of the Efsektia were former Yeshiva Bachrim, some of them even were Lubavitcher Chassidim, who were now die-hard communists. They were dyed in the wool. They were religiously dedicated, fanatically dedicated to this purpose. They thought they were helping the world and helping the Jews. And it's impossible to know how many deaths they caused directly and indirectly through these efforts. And of course, the tragic end of the story was that they themselves were given a bullet, which was Stalin's way of rewarding people who worked loyally for him. It was basically a tradition with him. And it made the story so sad that the Yidden were fighting Yidden in such a severe way. So, getting back to the story, when Rabbo Chatzah visited the previous Rebbe that summer, he talked about this effort being made in Russia to destroy religion and Yiddishkeit, and he said to Rabbo Chatzah, "Ich tracht, als ich soll sie schelten." I think I should curse them. And of course, the point that I was making was that if he would curse them, it would have an impact on them physically. So Rabbo Chatzah said, "Yeah, good idea. I'm with you. I think it's a wonderful idea." And the previous Rebbe's response was, "Ich hab meide." He said, "Dort zwischen sie sag Yidden. I'm afraid to curse them. Many of them are Jewish." So if you think about it, these were Jews who were solely and singularly and completely dedicated to destroying Yiddishkeit. And the previous Rebbe knows the power that he has as a tzaddik and as a Rebbe, ben tzaddik, ben Rebbe, ben tzaddik, ben Rebbe, and so on. And he hesitates, he doesn't want to curse them because he doesn't want to hurt this kind of a Jew. It gives you an idea of where the previous Rebbe's mind and heart was, even under those conditions. And this last story that I just told you, where the Rebbe is concerning himself with the Jewish people who were his worst enemies, is in effect the story of this Maamer Havaya li Biozroi v'ani Rebbe Seinei. Now, what I'm going to do is I'm going to give you the summary of this Maamer first. The first thing I'm going to tell you is what this Maamer is about. It's just the simplest way to do it. And after I tell you what the Maamer is about, we'll read, like I told you before, today we'll learn the Maamer itself, the Aschal and the Siyum, and the next two classes we'll do the Biur, which is going to be very, very involved. But today we'll do the basic Maamer. This Maamer is a juxtaposition of two psukim. The first pasuk is in Psalm 118:7, Kuf Yod Ches Zayin, like it says in footnote 1. Havaya li Biozroi v'ani Rebbe Seinei. It's part of Tilim, it's part of capital Kuf Yod Ches Tilim, which is Hallow. Havaya li Biozroi, the Eibush that is with me, along with all of those who are trying to help me. V'ani Rebbe Seinei, and I pray to see into my enemies, which is of course understood simply, I should see the defeat of my enemies. This is one pasuk. The second pasuk on which this Maamer is based is in the beginning of Perek Beis, and it's footnote 8. It's in Psalm 119:54, Kuf Yud Tes pasuk Nun Dalet. And this is the pasuk, Zemires ha'yali chukecha beveis magurei, that Yiddishkeit, Torah and mitzvahs, particularly Torah and mitzvahs, on a level of chukim, were zmires, were music, were a praise and a song to me when I find myself in an alien land. And this entire Maamer is analyzing these two psukim and explaining the difference between them. Before you get to the difference between the two psukim, what do the two psukim have in common? And the obvious answer, what the two psukim have in common, is David HaMelech is describing challenges that he has. David HaMelech is describing enemies that he's dealing with. And he's asking the Eibishter to help him overcome those enemies. And there are two different psukim, there are many others in Tilim as well, but these two particular psukim that describe what amounts to different responses of David HaMelech to the challenges and to the enemies that he had. The lower level is what's written second in this Maamer, Zemires ha'yali chukecha beveis magurei. And in short, what the Rebbe is going to explain is that David HaMelech appreciated what Torah is. And the Torah is ain't safe, and the world is nothing compared to the Torah, and so on and so forth. But because of how lofty the Torah is, how high the Torah is, particularly Torah on the Madrega of Chukecha, he therefore says Zmires. Zmires means it's praising the Eibishter, but Zmires also means lezamer, to cut off, to prune. Lezamer aritzim, to cut down those who are his enemies, those who are wicked. So this pasuk is describing David HaMelech dealing with enemies, and the David HaMelech is saying that the chukecha, the Torah mitzvahs that he had, that he was able to learn and practice beveis magurei, provided him with relief from his enemies in the form of zmires. Zmires means that his enemies were cut down by him learning Torah madrega of chukim. So the Maamer says that the Gemara says David HaMelech was punished for saying zmires halu chukecha beveis magurei. Why? What's the crime? Here are people trying to destroy David HaMelech. Here are people trying to destroy what David HaMelech stands for in the spirit of his life. So naturally, David wants them to be out of the way. And David HaMelech isn't even destroying them directly. He's not killing them. He's simply learning Torah. And learning Torah on a level of Zmidas what gives him great pleasure and delight. And it's a byproduct that Zmidas, they're cut down. Says the Rebbe, why was David HaMelech punished for saying Zmidas hayilu chukach maves magure? That to his Torah, on the level of Chukim, his enemies were defeated? Because Leila Tehu Baral Sheves Yitzhara, the Eibush did not create the world to be barren, to be desolate, but to be established, to be settled. In other words, when the Eibush gives a Yid an enemy, the purpose of that enemy is not that the enemy should be destroyed, but the enemy should be transformed. And the enemy should be transformed to such an extent that the enemy becomes a friend. Or to say it on a deeper level, just like we understand psychologically, that what doesn't break you makes you. That the most difficult experiences a person have in his life turn out in the end to be the greatest brachas, because the challenges create the man, create the character. Similarly, the opponents of David HaMelech were evil people, but through their opposition to David HaMelech, they squeezed David HaMelech and revealed within David HaMelech the very deepest powers of his neshama. So in effect, they were, notwithstanding their evil intent, their ill intent, doing a great service to David HaMelech. So when David says Zmires, that he's hoping that the Torah on a level of Chukim will cut off his enemies, he's punished for it because he's not recognizing how his enemies are ultimately doing Hashem's work and bringing him to a higher madrega, and in other places. And he should not have celebrated the fact that his enemies were destroyed through his Amidas Torah. That's the lower level. What's the higher level? Havaya liba Biozroi v'ani Rebbe. David Malach has enemies, but in this pasuk, and this pasuk of course is the very beginning of this Maamer, the Eibush should be with me, but Biozroi amongst those who are helping me. Who's helping David HaMelech? So the Lashon of the Maamer is in Itzutzei Kedusha, the sparks of holiness that David uplifts. But to be sure, the sparks of holiness David uplifts are where? In the evil people who are trying to destroy him. So the sparks of holiness David uplifts, which means the evil people who are the source of those sparks, that David uplifts, are called Biozroi, the helpers of David HaMelech, the support, the assistants of David HaMelech. How are they the helpers? How are they support? How are they supporting David HaMelech? Because those challenges are bringing out deeper koiches in David HaMelech. Those challenges are forcing David HaMelech to overcome them. And ultimately it reveals deeper koiches in David HaMelech, and it even reveals the good within those evil people by the virtue of David HaMelech overcoming them. So in the pasuk, Hashem liba Biozroi, David is not describing how his enemies are being destroyed by his Torah on a level of chukim, but rather how his enemies are being transformed to be considered the helpers of David HaMelech. And therefore the pasuk finishes, V'ani Rebbe. Not I should see the defeat of my enemies, but I should see what's inside my enemy, the betoich, like Yisishma Bekel. What is inside my enemy? What is the depth? What is the pnimius of my enemy? A spark of the Eibush, that the Shem HaMelech Halel, which is challenging David HaMelech, and he should see how his enemy's good is brought out and they're transformed into good. That's this Maamer. So it didn't take me very long. I did the Nekud of the Maamer. Pardon me. Both in the previous Rebbe's version and in this Maamer as well, but here it's just the very beginning and the end, is that there's two psukim that are both describing David HaMelech's opponents and struggle. But in one, it's Havaya, it's Zmidas hayilu chukach, that his enemies are destroyed. And you'll see in the Maamer that this is Torah, because Torah operates as a light from outside, which obliterates any opposition to itself. And David is punished for this, because the point is to transform the enemies. And then the other pasuk, and the Hashem liba Biozroi, where David sees his enemies as being his support, and Hashem should be with him and those who are trying to destroy him, and he's trying to reveal the godliness within them. You should see that the inside of his enemies is Elokus. And this the Rebbe calls tefillah, because since tefillah, prayer, is mamat alamah, from the bottom up, it doesn't destroy the enemy, it transforms the enemy. And of course the point of this Maamer is to say that Hashem liba Biozroi v'ani Rebbe is higher and better than Zmiras hayilu chukach maves magure, because the enemy is not being destroyed, the enemy is being transformed. Ad kan techen Maamer. This is the content of the Maamer. So if you think even a little bit about who said it, when he said it, and about whom he said it, the Maamer blows your mind. The Friedrich Rebbe on Tuesday, Yud Beis Tammuz, he's not even officially free. He wouldn't be freed officially till the following day, Yud Gimel Tammuz. But unofficially, he was told by Moscow, someone met him in the street and informed him that a table came, that he's free to go, he has to wait till tomorrow, and so on. What does the previous Rebbe say as soon as he's freed? Havaya li Biozroi. That all the Rishoyim, all of the opposition, all of the enemies that are trying to destroy him, and what he's trying to teach, Allah Hashem v'al Mashiach, are the Ezrim, the helpers of David HaMelech, and he asked that the Eibishter should be along with these Rishoyim who are helping him reveal the Eibishter by challenging him. And he concludes, I should see the good, the godliness which is inside of them. In other words, what the previous Rebbe says on the day he's liberated from prison is what he would say over and over again throughout his life. I would never ever, for all the money in the world, I would not allow myself to go through what I went through the Shpalerke in those 18 and a half days. But for all the money in the world, I wouldn't give up what I got by going through what I got in those 18 and a half days. Because by going through what he went through, the Rebbe reached a much higher madrega, and so on and so forth. And he attributes this additional level to the Biozroi, to the Rishoyim who brought him to that place. And he's saying, Havaya li Biozroi, Hashem should support and be with these Rishoyim who are now called the Ezrim, the helpers of the Frierdiker Rebbe, because with them and in them and through them, the Rebbe reached a higher madrega, and they were in his Bader and his Hapach and so on. So to think about this in practical terms, to think that under those conditions, the minute he's liberated from prison, or anticipates liberation, he right away sees the challenges as being an Ezer, as being a support, is really, really remarkable. And it's just one of 5 Maimorim that the Rebbe said that week. And like all of them, it reveals the Chassidus, the spiritual dimension, which is the source of the practical history, the actual events which occurred on the ground at that time. So without any further ado, we're going to begin the Maamer and learn, like I said to you before, the Maamer itself, the beginning and the end. It's not very difficult. The difficult parts will be with Shem tomorrow and the next day, in other words, the next 2 shiurim. Today's shtikela is not very, very difficult. Now, I just want to repeat again. I said it before, but I want to underscore it. After today, we're going to have 2 more classes. They are connected to the Maamer Havaya li Biozroi, but they are to a very, very great extent also self-contained. The next class is going to be analyzing the word chukecha in the pasuk Zmiris Hayelu chukecha beveis megurei, and discuss the idea of Eides chukim and mishpatim in a very comprehensive way, concise but comprehensive. And the second class is going to focus on the word Havaya, and how Havaya, who is li Biozroi, is higher than the highest understanding of what chukecha are. And by understanding the difference between the word chukecha and the word Havaya, we'll understand how as high as chukecha is. Zemiris hayilu chukecha beveis megurei brought David HaMelech a punishment and an einish. And how the pasuk Adeshem li Biozroi v'niyera b'seinei was not only not a punishment, this was a halal, a praise to Eibishter from David HaMelech, because of the advantage of Havaya over chukecha, as we'll see in the next 2 classes, and the Lashon Hara v'okafi sheyizbaya lekaman. Now let's get to the Maamer itself. David HaMelech says in Kapitel Kuf Yud Ches and Tilim, Adeshem li Biozroi, the Eibishter should be with me, along with all the others who help me. V'aniyera b'seinei, I should merit to see the defeat of my enemy. The Pashat the Taich is not I should see the God in my enemy, but the defeat of my enemy. The previous Rebbe, whose Chag Agolo Yud Beis Tammuz is, says in this Maamer, Yud Beis Tammuz, which was at the very first Yud Beis Tammuz, 1927 Tafresh Pi Zayin. And like I told you, in 1 week there were 5 Maamarei Chassidus, the second of which was Adeshem li Biozroi, the Mashmos Haloshen Havaya li Biozroi. If you look at the words, the Eibishter should be to me or with me, along with Biozroi, indicates sheyesh nam Ezrim b'cheirim, there are many helpers. And the David HaMelech's request, the previous Rebbe's request, is Shagam HaKadosh Baruch Hu Yeh Bein Ha'edin, the Eibishter should also help. Havaya li Biozroi, amongst all the other helpers I have, should also be Shem Havaya. Ve'inei move until the question is obvious. Hadekol Yisrael Mamin and Be'emunah Pshuta, all of us believe. Who Yisbarech Levadeh, who the Eibishter is the one and only one, and certainly he is the only one that is Ha'ezer v'Hamashia Laha'adam. The truth of the matter is, there's nothing besides for him altogether. But certainly, when it comes for helping people, nobody can help a person besides the Eibishter himself. He's the Oizer and the Moshiach Laha'adam. He's the support and the savior of a person, in all of the matters of a person's life. And therefore the question is, hey, why make mention to Oizai, that there are other helpers? And the Eibush is also one of them, and that the Eibush should join with them. The Mashmoas Haloshen Hu, which indicates, there are other assistants, other helpers. And naturally, bepashtos sheheim ha'ezim hamitim, they're the helpers that you can't do without. You must have those other helpers. And he's simply davening Hakadosh Baruch Hu mitzvah imam. The Eibush should also join with them. And this is David HaMelech's bakasha and tefillin. Of course, this is very odd that David HaMelech, the Meshoirer, should speak as the Oizer, the other helpers as the Ikya, and the Eibush as the Tafel. That's the first question. Gam, the second question is Tzarech lahavin ma'u bakasha v'niyada b'seinei. The second half of this short pasuk says, I should see in my enemies. And of course, literally and practically, it means I should see the defeat of my enemies. Sheyid and Nekama b'sein of David HaMelech should be able to enjoy the vengeance, the revenge against his enemies. The question becomes, David HaMelech should have preferred to request Ha'oivim v'aseinim yahavchol ayavim. Rather than daven for their destruction, he should daven for their transformation into friends, to lovers. And you cannot say that the reason he says to defeat of the enemies is because who did David hate? David didn't hate people who were giving him a hard time. People who hated people who were opponents to HaKadosh Baruch Hu and giving HaKadosh Baruch Hu a hard time. David HaMelech, I hate those you hate. So you would think that it makes sense to say because when we say Soinim over here, we don't only mean physical enemies of David HaMelech, we mean the spiritual enemies of David HaMelech. Says the Rebbe, even if that were the case, the pasuk still says, even if you're dealing with such evil people, that their category is Meidin V'lei Mailin. That still we know the Chazal tell us that you have to pray not for the defeat of the Rishoyim, but of the ways of the Rishoyim. Sinners should be removed, but not the sin. I'm sorry, the sins should be removed, and not the sinners. Says the Rebbe, this idea that what the Chazal say, that we pray, that the sins should be removed, that the sins apply even to such sinners. All of us know this word. We saw in the conduct of our Rabbein, especially the previous Rebbe, the previous Rebbe. They were Makadavin, such people that are included in that category. Written at the very end of chapter 32 in Tanya. And of course, what you have in the last lines of chapter 32 in Tanya. So basically, the point is this: the first half of Tanya, Perek Lamed Beis, describes Avas Yisrael al pi chsidus. V'ahavta l'recha kamecha al pi chsidus. When you finish learning V'ahavta l'recha kamecha al pi chsidus, you come away with a question. It's a strange question, but it's a question nevertheless. There's a section in Shulchan Aruch about Yidden who are the Shoyim, that their din is Meidin V'lei Mailin. You have to lower them and not raise them. You have to hate them. So according to what Alter Rebbe writes in the first half of Perek Lev, how you're supposed to love a fellow Jew, there's no Jews left to hate, so to speak. So you wonder what is the meaning of the idea of hating a fellow Jew when in Tanya the Alter Rebbe describes Avos Yisrael in a way that includes everybody. So the Alter Rebbe goes, the second half of Perek Lamed Beis is really a halacha. It's a siman in Shulchan Aruch. It's, forgive me for putting it this way, it's Hilchas Sinas Yisrael. How you're allowed to hate a Jew. Yes, mitzvahs. And you warned him, and he didn't listen, and so you're supposed to hate him, and at the same time you're supposed to love him, and so on and so forth. So it's very complicated how you're supposed to hate, and even then you're supposed to hate only his actions and not him, and so on. The very last two lines of the Perek say, "V'lei da'amar David HaMelech alav hashalom, tachlas sinim, sneisim elaba minim b'pekorsim she'ein lechem chelik b'lekei Yisrael." That's more or less how the Perek finishes. I don't have a Tanya open in front of me. That's the spirit of it. That there is a category of Jew you're supposed to hate completely. Not like the Alter Rebbe says that along with the Chesed has to be Gvur and also Rachmim. Liyankav Shapadas Avram. But you have to hate them absolutely. Who are these people? Of course. So the Rebbe in his notes makes an observation. And the observation the Rebbe makes is that the Alter Rebbe writes in Tanya, David HaMelech. That David HaMelech was the one who said, Tachlas Sinas Neis. So he asks the question the Rebbe does, why do you have to mention David HaMelech by name? And the Rebbe answers because only a Yid like David HaMelech has allowed to hate such a big Rasha. The rest of us are not even allowed to hate such a big Rasha. Only David is such a big tzaddik that when it came to somebody who was Misanecha, the Shem Esna, he was allowed to hate him completely. And even David HaMelech, who was permitted to hate a Rasha Gomer completely, even he said that the Shem li be'ezei v'niyere b'seine. Right, so the Rebbe says, going back to the Maamer, the Friedrich of Makar of such Yidden, v'hirzi, a last line on Pedic Aleph and page Nun Hey, hirziru eis l'muta, brought them back to good. So the question becomes, why does David HaMelech daven the Rebbe saying to watch them suffer? Have the levakesh asu tshuva, prefer they should daven, they should do tshuva. And what is the bakasha of the Rebbe saying? That in the meantime it means I'm going to see the defeat of my Rebbe. Of course, later we're going to see something different. But in the meantime, these are the two questions. So the first question is, why does the Eibush have more helpers? And the second question is, why is the Eibush davening for the defeat of his enemy? He should daven for their transformation. And even Yidden, that the Torah, that David HaMelech, that the Eibush that hates completely, are also in this category. These are the questions. So we have these two questions. Why is David identifying others that are helping him, and Havaya li be'ezrei, and Hashem is only amongst them? And why is David HaMelech saying, I should see their defeat rather than their transformation? This is how we understand it initially. So now we begin Pedic Beis, in order to answer Pshat in this pasuk, which is David HaMelech describing his enemies and his tzadis and davening to be alleviated from them. He brings Mashal David the second pasuk, where David HaMelech is also describing his involvement with his opposition. But in this case it says, music, song, pleasure. And on the next page, that was going to call it praise. A word to me, Yiddishkeit, Teire and Mitzvah, which is called Chukim Beveis Magurei, while he was in an alien land, and it was in a foreign land. Like we all know the story in Tanakh, that Shaul was trying to kill David HaMelech, and there was a period of time that he went to live in Plishtim, in Gas. And he says this pasuk that when he was in that foreign land, Chukecha, Yiddishkeit, and particularly Teiru Mitzvahs, on a level of Chukim, provided him with Zmiris. Translates the Rebbe, when he was moving from place to place, total, displaced, and he was a Ged. Megure, Miloshin Ged, as the word Megure means like a Ged, like an alien, like a foreigner. Umal leipchodim, and full of fear, because there's a second translation of Ged. Megure Loshin Maguru Pachat, from the word fear, and he's Mitzayin Tagamara Mesechta Seita Rashi. So when David HaMelech was a foreigner and afraid of his enemies, Misein over Mirage, from those who hate him and those who are pursuing him, Hayim Misaneg V'Sameach. Under those conditions, David found delight, pleasure, and David found the joy. What delighted him, and what gave him joy? B'divrei Teirei Chukecha, the words of Teirei which are Chukim, Shayu Arev, and Mesukim lay, they were pleasant and sweet for him. Kamei Zmiris V'Nigurim, like music. Under the worst of conditions, David HaMelech says Zmiris, that the Chukim, Teirei, on a level of Chukim, gave him great pleasure. So, of course, the question is, how do you understand that idea? That the very fact that you have Teirei on a level of Chukim gives you great pleasure. But there's a second question which the Rebbe asks overtly. And the next question is this. There's all kinds of pleasure. Why does David describe the pleasure which he experienced? That he had from words of Teirei on a level of Chukim, to the pleasure which is in music, in song. So why does he call his pleasure Zmiris? Gam tzarech lav, and the next question is, mitzvahs gimel sugim. Mitzvahs has three categories: mishpatim, eidos, v'chukim. Logical mitzvahs, semi-logical mitzvahs, and mitzvahs with no logic whatsoever. And the Rebbe is going to spell out what they are. Mishpatim, heim ha-mitzvahs. What are mishpatim? They are mitzvahs shemachiyov, gam et hadaseichel, which man must keep reasonably. Kamei gezel, geneve, no kibbut aveim, not to steal, and not to rob, and not to steal, not to create inflation by overcharging, and to honor your parents. And then you have Eidos, mitzvahs that are called testimonials. Heima mitzvahs, those are the commandments. Shem Eitz v'zikaron, they're a sign and a recollection, like Shabbos for creation in 6 days, Pesach, the exodus from Egypt, Sukkah, that Sukkah is the Shaftes B'nai Yisrael, and Tefillin, which is also a Remes v'Yitzias Mitzrayim. The Gam mitzvahs elu, these mitzvahs as well, yesh lehem makom b'seichel, have an indirect relationship with reason. In other words, you would never think of these mitzvahs by yourself, like you would think of not stealing and not killing by yourself. But once the Eibishter gives us the reason for the mitzvah, that it represents, it reminds us of an event, of a nest which happened to us, they make sense to us. A human mind without help of the Torah would not come up with these mitzvahs. With the lake mitzvahs, the mishpatim, top of page Nunvav now, as opposed to those mitzvahs that go into the category of mishpatim. The Torah would not be given, the Gemara says. And of course, the Rebbe Rashab used to add the word chas v'shalom. We would learn modesty from cats, who are very modest in the way they behave. And not to be dishonest, from ants who won't steal from one another. So there are mitzvahs that make so much sense, the human mind would construe them without any help from the Eibishter. Then there are mitzvahs that by ourselves we wouldn't figure them out, but once the Eibishter give them to us, they make sense. Nevertheless, once the Torah commands us to do them, and gives us a reason, because since the Eibishter created the world in 6 days, and on the 7th day he rested, we should also rest on the 7th day, that the human mind agrees. So mishpatim are so logical, we would figure them out entirely by ourselves. Edis are logical only once the Eibishter gives them to us. The third category is chukim, heim ha-mitzvahs, she'einem al pitam. These are mitzvahs that don't make any sense at all. They have no geshmak, no tam, no reason. And the only reason we keep them is they were edicts that were declared by HaKadosh Baruch Hu. And of course the word chukah means an edict. Chakakti means I carved. And of course the way it's explained in other Maimorim. Also on this pasuk, that this is the union of Chakika, that a Yid is one with Yiddishkeit, and therefore he does what the Eibishter wants without having to understand it at all. And the same is true. Gzeira gazarti. Gzeira means a decree. Gazarti means I have agishet, and I cut, I fixed. And when David HaMelech says that as an alien in a foreign land full of fear, he got pleasure, which is called Zemiris. From Torah, he says specifically from Chukim. The next question of this Maamer is 3 lines in the top of page Nunvav. Mashakosov, when it says Miris Hayili Chukecha, the David HaMelech is praising HaKadosh Baruch Hu for Yiddishkeit and how it gave him joy and pleasure, but specifically Yiddishkeit at the level of Chukim. Hari Posher, it's understood. The fact that David learned Torah under those conditions, and that the learning of Torah gave him delight and joy. He learned all of the Torah. Gam bahadinim the edus umishpatim, even those laws that make sense to some extent or absolutely, and nevertheless that the real issue of delight and pleasure that David HaMelech got were from the level of mitzvahs called chukim chukecha dafka. And the question is why. So we have 2 more questions on the second pasuk. The first question is, why does he describe the pleasure that he had as music? This is mitzvahs. And the second question is, why of all in Yom of Yiddishkeit does he gain that pleasure from the level of mitzvahs, which is called chukim? Now remember, there's a very big difference between the first pasuk and the second pasuk. And I'm cheating. I'm repeating again what I told you before, because in the pasuk Zemiris Hayili Chukecha, the pshat is going to be that through Torah's enemies were destroyed, as opposed to the pasuk of the Shem Li Biozroi and Rebbe Seinei, that through this tefillah of Havaya Li Biozroi, and the emphasis is on the union of tefillah, his enemies were transformed. So now the Rebbe begins answering the questions. V'ha'inyan, who the teretz is as follows. We're holding Sif Gimel. That Zemide is the reason why the word that is used for pleasure and delight in this pasuk is song, is because besides Zemide is being music, Zemide is gamin shevach. It means praise. It says in Tanya Kuntasach, and of course that's the basis for the Maamer in Lukutei Torah and in Derech Mitzvah and Masar Bakosef, and then you have a lot of Maamer from the various Rebbe, including in Ayim Beis, that Masha David called a Divrei Torah b'Shem Zmiris. He called the Torah music not because of the music aspect, but because of Shvacha Deiraisa. He was praising Torah. And this answers the first of the 2 questions that we asked in Sif Beis. Why does he call the pleasures Zmiris? And the answer is, it's not a question of music, it's a question of praise. David was giving praise to the whole Torah. Zmiris, he was praising the Torah. But how does the Torah deserve praise? The life of all of the worlds, it depends on one nuance in the words of Torah. As we all know, The Eibishter created the world. Stakel be'iraiso bora alma. He looked into the Torah and created the world. The Torah is the blueprint for the world. But in addition to the Torah being the blueprint for the world, the Torah is the purpose of the world. Like it says in the Medrash, Bereishis beis reishis. B'shvil ha-Torah shenikras reishis. The Torah is the reason the Eibishter created the world. If you take away the Torah, there's no reason for the world to exist. The Torah is the pnimi esaratz and the chatzi amiti of the world, which is chitzeni esaratz. The world lives off Yiddishkeit. So that's what the Melech is saying. A Yid learns Torah, does a mitzvah, paskins a halach, studies one diktuk, one nuance in the Torah. That's the chayis of the whole world. And he continues. V'ashayich is the Peter Zeh. Once we retranslate the word zmiris, instead of meaning music, to mean praise, we now also connect it lepirush aposhet, to the simple pshat in this pasuk. Zmiris ha'ilucha kechav when the David got great pleasure on difficult conditions, and it helped him get through his hardships. It's as follows: David HaMelech contemplated the greatness and the praise of the Torah. What is the greatness? What is the praise of the Torah? Shakol ha'elam is betelim b'mitzias. All of the worlds are nothing in their form. Lagabi diktuk echad diktuk Torah. One nuance of Torah. The world lives off Torah, and relatively speaking, the whole creation is nothing compared even to one detail in halachas Torah. Ayedei ze Paul biyatzme. When he stopped and thought how the Torah is a balabas over the world, and every halacha and every mitzvah and every thought in Torah is greater than the life of all of the worlds, he made himself realize that the whole of the creation, and certainly the aspect of the creation which was the source of his hardships, is nothing in the big picture. When his life was not good materially, he learned Torah, and it made him very happy. Because he said that tzaddas that I'm having on the worldly level, and the pleasure that I'm having is on the Torah level, and one detail of Torah is more than the whole world. Allah has kama v'kama, more than my tzaddas. So Zemiris, David HaMelech praised the Torah. Hayuli chukecha, with the idea of chukim, because the whole Torah is the whole world is nothing compared to diktuk echad shel divrei Torah, and therefore it gave him great pleasure. But this is what says in Alten Rebbe, and gets sakedish in Kuntesach. And over there also the Alter Rebbe brings the Gemara, Zmiris Karas Lu David Melech was punished, but in the Alter Rebbe's Maamer in Tanya gives a different reason, different than our Maamer. In Tanya, the Alter Rebbe says David Melech was punished because he compared the Torah to the world. He should have instead focused on the idea that Shashui HaMelech Bat Smusa. He shouldn't have seen the Torah as being greater than the world. He should have seen the Torah as something which is higher than that. And he was punished for focusing on Chitzeni Yisatayr rather than Pnimi Yisatayr, and that's why he made a mistake with Basa Adam because of V'chulu. But our Maamer is taka based on the Igeres HaKedish and the Kunte Sachrin, but the previous Rebbe and the Rebbe goes in a different direction. Then why was he punished? Not because he praised the Torah as being above the world, but because he praised the Torah as destroying his enemies. And now we keep reading. Maamer, the Baal HaGiyula, and the Maamer, the previous Rebbe, Mavad 8 Pirush. He adds another detail in the idea of Zmiris Hayilichu Kecha, that the Torah, the Zmiris was a pleasure and a place for David HaMelech. Why? Because they translate the word Zmiris not only from the word Shevach, from the word Chituch Okrisa, to cut and to destroy, like Lezamer Aritzim, which is the first apostle. David HaMelech learns Torah. And Torah's Zmiris, Miloshan Lezamer Aritzim, this battle called Seinav V'Reitvav. The enemies and the pursuers of David HaMelech are destroyed. As the Gemara says, Hashkim v'harev aleim lebeis hamedrash. Get up before they do. Go to sleep after they do. And spend that time learning Torah. V'hen kolam aleim, and you'll automatically destroy them. So David HaMelech said, Zmiris hayilichu kecha b'veis megure, that the Torah gave him great pleasure because it's so much greater than the world. And the Torah also destroyed his enemies. V'yesh lekasher shnei hapirushim, these two ideas. That Zmiris, that David HaMelech praised the Torah because it's so great relative to the world. And Zmiris, that this Torah destroys his enemies. What's the connection between the two Pirushim? It says like this. When a Yid like David HaMelech learns Torah on the level of Zmiris, that he praises it. As the Tanya explains it. And what does the Tanya explain? So that he felt and he experienced. Shechayes kol ha'elam, is that the life of all of the worlds. Totally bediktik echad shel Torah hangs on one nuance in Torah. And therefore the whole world is nothing compared to the Torah, and therefore all the tzaddas in the world are nothing compared to the Torah. So this first interpretation of Zemides Hayelichukecha, to see the greatness of Torah relative to the world, it causes the Masheini Matim L'Torah when something is not consistent with the Torah, or Mikoshke Mashenagid L'Torah, especially if it's against the Torah, Lechayis cannot live. Zemides Miloshen L'Zamir to destroy enemies. So when a person appreciates how great the Torah is compared to the world, automatically something in the world against the Torah destroys. And later in this Maamer, you will see in the beginning of Perek Yud Aleph that he's going to say that this is the problem with Torah, that since Torah is Milmaila Lamata, Torah Yamshacha Milmaila, and Va'abira de Torah B'derech Dechia. Because Torah is so strong, the light of the Torah, Zemides Hayelichukecha, destroys the world. We can therefore explain Mashakos of Zemides Hayelichukecha. The Dafka, the Chelik of Torah called Chukim, provided David Melech with this praise and this celebration. First of all, how the Torah is greater than the world, and second of all, as such, it automatically destroys anything which opposes the will of the Torah. Kishnei and Yonam Anal Shabbos Minas the Torah. To be sure, these two ideas is what makes Torah special. First of all, Shvacha De'iraisa, the praise that the Torah is, every nuance in Torah is greater than the whole world. And second of all, the Zamar Aritzim, Torah automatically destroys anything which opposes it. Heim Be'ikir is primarily Mitadin Yachukim Shabbat Torah, is not in Torah in general, it's Dafka Torah in the level of Chukim. And later on top of page Nun Ches, I believe, the Rebbe says the reason it's Dafka and Chukim, because the Madrega of Eides and Mishpatim, since they make sense, the Veltas Tefes Makam Lagabam, as opposed to Chukim, where the Welt has no Tfisas Mokim, so Dafka Madrega of Chukim, which the Welt has no Tfisas Mokim, the world is nothing compared to the Chukim, and therefore it has these two effects. So we learn two psukim, two psukim. The first pasuk is Avayeli Be'ezrei V'Niyere B'Seinoi, and we asked two questions which have not yet answered. And then we brought Zemides Hayelichukecha B'Veis Megurei, and we answered both of the questions. Why does David HaMelech say Zemides? And of course the answer is he's praising the Torah. Why does he speak about Chukim? Because Dafke Chukim, which are completely higher than reason, relate to the world in such a way that the world has no Tfisas Makom compared to the Torah. And the Pshat and the Pasuk Zemides Hayelichukecha B'Veis Megurei is that David HaMelech's Torah gave him incredible pleasure. And at the same time, in the same token, it destroyed his opposition. So now, we haven't yet gotten back to the first pasuk, Havai Liba Ezrei, right? We asked questions of Havai Liba Ezrei and didn't answer them. Now we moved on to Zemides Hayelichukecha B'Veis Megurei and we did answer them. Now turn to page Samach and read the beginning of Perek Yud Aleph. We're only going to read a little bit of this. Once we understand this pasuk, Zemides Hayelichukecha B'Veis Megurei, that David HaMelech praises the Torah, particularly the level of Chukim, that the worlds are nothing in comparison. And therefore, with this Kayach HaTorah Zemides, it destroys his enemies. Says the Gemara, and the Alter Rebbe brings it, and the Rebbe brings it, that Masha David Nenesh, David was punished for this. Now, what's wrong with praising the Eibishter for giving him a Torah? That one word of Torah is greater than the whole world, and as such, the enemies of David are being destroyed. Says the Rebbe is as follows: Ki eisek HaTorah de David hoya be'efen de lezamer aritzim kanal. David learned Torah, and the Torah destroyed his opposition. And even though you could argue that he's right, his enemies are such deshoyim, correct? Tachlas sin is neisim. How did they bring in the beginning of the Maamer Hashem the Shem Esna? Says the Rebbe, nevertheless he was punished. Why? Because v'tachas hakavana, the purpose of creation is k'mesher kosov leila teyu bara, the Eibishter did not create the world for chaos, for destruction, l'sheves yitzara, to settle it, it was formed. In other words, l'sastik b'vedas habirurim, to engage in the work of clarifying the good from the evil and raising up the good, and finally l'hamshach yireh be'elam, to bring light into the world. And Zemides was destructive. What's David HaMelech destroying Rishayim? Nevertheless, the fact that he's using the Torah to destroy a piece of the world is reason for an einish, because the kavanah is to take these enemies and take these obstacles and transform them. And then the Rebbe says, this is the advantage of davening over learning Torah. Now, of course, in the context of this Maamer, you would say This is the advantage of the pasuk Havaya Liba Ezrei V'Aniyere B'Seini, which is the Inyan Tefillah, as we'll see soon. In contrast to the pasuk Zmiris Hayilichu Kecha B'Veis Meguri, which is the Inyan Teira. The Tefillah Bir V'Allah, Tefillah lifts up from the bottom. And therefore, Hainu Shaydei Tefillah Su Davening Misbaredim Anitutzeis, the sparks are clarified, Umazachem and refined, Ve'elim and raised up Lamaila, like David HaMelech is going to say in the other pasuk, Havaya Libi Ezrei, the Eibush that helps me amongst my enemies. Mashain Kain Teira, which is in the pasuk Zmiris Hayilichu Kechazam Shacham Lamaila, brings godliness from heaven to earth. Va'abir, right, the way Teira gives the clarifications, B'derech Dechiyah, is by pushing away. And therefore, Kasherot David, Lavada Birudim and David is Mavada Birudim in this pasuk is Midas. Through Tairas, B'derech Dechiyah is Amaritim, he pushes away the klipas. And therefore, Nenesh he's punished. Kitachas Hakavon is Lasheves Yitzhar. The purpose is to make the world settled and inhabited with godliness by transforming Ra into Teva and evil into good. So, we really, as you know what's going to happen, right? But we're just going to read it. In the pasuk Zmiris, David HaMelech is using Torah, and because in the pasuk Zmiris, David HaMelech is using Torah, the Maamer tells us that the Zmiris destroys his enemy, and this is the Einish. A Yid should not daven for the destruction of his enemy, for his transformation. Why? Because Lasheves Yitzhara. What's the other side of that coin? Havaya Liba Ezrei V'Aniyere B'Seini. Now, according to what we have now, Havaya Liba Ezrei V'Aniyere B'Seini is Tefillah. And Tefillah raises from the bottom up, so the enemy is not only not destroyed, the enemy is transformed in such a way that the enemy is called Oizrei. So now we go to page Samach Beis, and we read the end of the Maamer. V'zehu Havaya Libi Ezrei. This is the pshat that David HaMelech is davening and saying, the Eibishter is with me and those who help me. Says the Rebbe, Oizroi, who are the helpers of David HaMelech? Ko Yalin Tzutas HaMizbar, and there's sparks which are being clarified. Shehem ha'ezrim ha'mitim shala adam, they're the true helpers of a person. And he brings from Kabbalah Aderach, Aido bin Yikilei, Allah lechan lavad yechi ha'adam, kalkot mitzpi ava yechi ha'adam, a person doesn't live from the bread, but from the spark of the Eibush that was inside. Aidei shad mavaras anei tzutas shabbat. When you eat food, it gives you life. But you're also clarifying the sparks of godliness in minerals and plants and animals. And nimchach l'teises keich b'avidas, gives you more light, life, and energy in your avodah. Shanei tzutas ezrim ha'mesayim lei, the sparks help you. So if you think about it, if the sparks that you're mavaded help you, the enemy that's carrying those sparks is the potential ezer, the potential helper, because that enemy has that spark that when you're going to transform that enemy and extract that spark, is going to help you serve the Eibishter better. Upirosh Havaya Liba Ezrehu. What is the meaning that David HaMelech davens and he says that the Eibishter Havaya, and of course you'll have to see in the next couple of classes, particularly in the third class, how we're touching the word Havaya is going to help me. Shanitzutzim HaMizbaredim Ezrei, that the ones who are helping me are the sparks of the Eibishter which are in the world and in my enemies. And even though the clarification of these sparks in a way which doesn't destroy them but transforms them and raises them, it's from the bottom up in the Elam. At the same time, Oizroi is elevating sparks, and along with the Oizroi, which is elevating sparks from the bottom up, there should be Havaya, which is from the top down, as we're going to explain Havaya later on. Joining together the Oizrei, which is Mulmata Lamaila, and the Havaya, which is Mulmaila Lamata, comes from Havaya Shem Etzem, which is the third Taichan Shem Havaya, as you see in the third Shir. So, the Rebbe teaches this pasuk, and what we sort of know now at this point in the Maamer, that Zmiris Hayluch HaKacha B'Veis Meguri is Teda, which destroys a klip, and therefore there's an Einish. And the Shem Liba Ezei V'Nyere B'Seini is Tefillah, which elevates a klip. But in addition to elevating the klipa, you ask that Havaya should be nimshach mamayla lamat. What about the final words of V'Aniyere B'Seini that I should see in my enemies? And of course, the simple translation of the word V'Aniyere B'Seini means I should see their defeat. The Gamelu Shem Seini David, the very enemies of David HaMelech, Shem Seini Havaya. Of course, if you hate David, you hate the Eibishter. If you hate the Eibishter, you hate David. Nevertheless, Ein Tzadach Chesam L'Gam, shouldn't be altogether pushed away. To separate and to uplift the sparks of good which are inside of them, and of course naturally when you extract those sparks, this battle, the evil is destroyed. When you transform klipa into kedusha, you see godliness in the levriya. You see the godliness inside the enemy. Like, and this is my words now, like it says in the pasuk in Pasha Srei in the Kutatera, kitishma bakel. Riyas alakus b'muchash. You're seeing godliness vividly. Why? How can you see godliness vividly when you see godliness spiritually? It's called a riyas sichlis. How can you see godliness vividly? And the answer is gam binyan ha'elam. When you see physical things in the world which you see vividly, and you see how those physical things are godliness, so then you're seeing godliness on a level which is vivid. The Rebbe finishes the Maamer. As we saw by the Frierdiker Rebbe, Shagam hamenagdim, the opponents of the Frierdiker Rebbe, av shenishru to Yossi, they remained opponents. They were forced because they each have a spark inside of themselves. To do the will of HaKadosh Baruch Hu. And there was Gili Elokus Delamalim Teva B'Muchash B'Teva. You saw in the world, in nature itself, godliness. And because it was in the world, it was called a Riyah Chushas. And the previous Rebbe used this to bring strength to call in his pathways. To join together godliness which is above nature with nature. And this is a consequence of the Meiser and Gula of the Frierdiker Rebbe. And as I told you in my introduction, what you really take away from this Maamer is that the previous Rebbe, at the initial moment of his Geula, is referring to his severe enemies as Ezrei. At least the sparks of godliness inside of them as Ezrei. To see the godliness in his opposition. And the Rebbe finishes, this becomes an imminent preparation. To complete the purpose of the Rebbe Tachteinim. That the world should be a home for HaKadosh Baruch Hu, Leilatz Musei, Begula Mitzvah Vashleim Adem Mashiach Tzedkenu, but God of Mamish. Or as the Rebbe said in the later years, Peteka from Yad Mamish. And in Mitzvah Hashem, in the next class, we're going to explore this concept of Chukim, Zimina Soili Chukecha B'Beis Magurei. And in the class after that, we're going to explore Havaya, the Inyan of Havaya Li B'Yezrei.